Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraja Kacharya Ashto Tarita Shishimad Abhay Charanarvindam Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Kuri Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Bhiviti Samstapakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maya Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Shrimati Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Shrimati Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Samveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, entitled Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness. Text number 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Bhala. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Bhala. Pravadhanti na panditaha. Pravadhanti na panditaha. Ekam apyastita samyak. Ekam apyasti samyak. Samyak. Upayor vindate phalam. Upayor vindate phalam. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Bhala. Pravadanti na panditaha. Ekam apyastita samyak. Upayor vindate phalam. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Bhala. Pravadhanti na panditaha. Ekam apyastita samyak. Upayor vindate phalam. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Bhala. Tadbhala pravadhanti na panditaha. Sankhya, analytical study of the material world. Yoga, work in devotional service. Pritak, different. Balaha, the less intelligent. Pravadanti, say. Na, never. Panditaha, the learned. Ekam, in one. Api, even. Astitaha, being situated. Samyak, complete. Uvayo, of both. Vindate, enjoys. Palam, the result. Translation. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the result of both. Purport. The aim of the analytical study of the material world is to find the soul of existence. The soul of the material world is Vishnu, or the Supersoul. Devotional service to the Lord entails service to the Supersoul. One process is to find the root of the tree, and the other is to water the tree. The real student of Sankhya philosophy finds the root of the material world, Vishnu, and then, in perfect knowledge, engages himself in the service of the Lord. Therefore, in essence, there's no difference between the two, because the aim of both is Vishnu. Those who do not know the ultimate end say that the purpose of Sankhya and Karma Yoga are not the same. But one who's learned knows that the unifying aim in these different processes. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Gadim Yat Kripa Taraham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramanam Namaravam Shri Chaitanyishvaram. Sankhya Yoga Pritak Bhala Pravadhanti Napanditaha Ekam Apyastita Samyag Upayor Vindate Phalam. So, Sankhya Yoga. Again, Krishna's answering the question that Arjuna gave in the very first verse of this chapter, which we'll read. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" So again, Krishna is explaining that, right? And what he's saying here is Sankhya, which means the analytical study, Sankhya Yoga, of the material world, to understand what is the root, what is the source of the material world. And yoga refers to devotional service. Karma Yoga, or devotional service. So Pritak means to say or to consider, different. Pritak means different. Balaha means intelligence, but it also is the word for like a child. A child, bala, right? Balak, in Hindi, balak. So they think that, children are innocent, but at the same time they don't have so much intelligence. So to think that Sankhya Yoga, our devotional service, are different is less intelligent. It's like the intelligence of a child. It's not complete. So pravanti napanditaha. Pravadanti napanda. Pravanti means to say, and never panditaha, the learned. So the learned, they never say that there's a difference. They don't talk like that, right? Only less intelligent people consider Sankhya Yoga and devotional service or Karma Yoga to be different. But if we analyze it, they certainly appear different. One is the analytical study of the material world, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, finding the root of the tree. One is finding the root of the tree to analyze the different elements of this material world, to understand what is its source. And the other one, Prabhupada gives the example of watering the root of the tree, devotional service, watering the root of the tree, actually performing activities in the service of the Lord, devotional service, like hearing about the Lord, chanting about the Lord, remembering the Lord. All the different processes are activities in relationship to the Lord. So they appear different. But what Krishna is saying is that the result, it is the same. Prabhupada explains that Sankhya Yoga means to analyze the material world, to find out the root, the cause, the source, right? Like the root of the tree. It's the source of the tree's everything. Water, energy, right? Comes from the root. In the same way, finding out this material world means to understand that Vishnu is the source. And once you understand that Vishnu is the source, then you'll conclude that I should surrender unto him, that I should serve. Right? And devotional service is the same. To render service to the Supreme Lord, people come for different reasons. Maybe distress, maybe in search for wealth, maybe they're inquisitive, or they have actual knowledge, but they render service. Right? So the conclusion is the same. The conclusion of Sankhya Yoga is to serve Vishnu. Find out Vishnu and serve him. And the conclusion of devotional service is the same. So the processes may be different, but the end result, Krishna is saying, is one and the same. Ekam api yastita samya. So, following either one to its conclusion will bring the result of the other. Right? Upayar, both, vindate phalam. You may follow this or you may follow that, but if you actually come to the conclusion of either Sankhya Yoga or devotional service, the result will be the same, and that is, the fruit will be the same, and that is service to Krishna and developing attachment and love for Krishna. So Krishna is explaining this to Arjuna. And so this is the a chapter that explains about action in Krishna consciousness, Karma Yoga. Clarifying what is Karma Yoga. Actually, it's devotional service. It's rendering service to Krishna. But in order to do that, one has to give up attachments in order to render service to Krishna. But it may not be possible for one to immediately give up attachments. And therefore there's the process. Devotional service is delineated by Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, to hear and chant about Krishna. And by this process, one gradually gives up the material attachments. In this material world, everyone is attached to sense gratification, whether it's Lord Brahma or even the insignificant ant, right? The ants are also after sugar. That's like an intoxication for ants. If you keep some little sugar on the table, sure enough, some ants will come and they'll find that. And they get very much intoxicated by eating that sugar. Right? So, whatever form of life in this material world, the end product of that is sense gratification, material sense gratification. Yet devotional service means giving up sense gratification to satisfy the senses of Krishna. Just like if you want to pick up something and you have something in your hand, first you have to let go of that item in your hand so that you can pick up the item that you want. In the same way, if we want to become complete in devotional service, then one has to give up the desire for sense gratification. And the process of devotional service is set up for that. The material body, as analyzed in Sankhya Yoga, has the senses, right? And they have the sense objects. There's also the working senses and the senses for acquiring knowledge, right? So analyzing all these things is to understand that I am something different from this. Right? The spirit soul has an identity separate from the material body. But in the conditioned state, one is thinking that I'm this body. That I'm this body and that I can enjoy. The process of devotional service is to rectify that consciousness, is to bring us to the platform of understanding that I'm something different from the body. And that I'm meant to serve Krishna. Jiver Sarup Hoy Nitya Krishna Das. I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. As long as the living entity is trying to find out happiness in this material world in some way or another, just like we see from the Vedic literatures, there are so many prescriptions for pious activities by rendering sacrifices, etc. Even to the point where one can be elevated from this material planet of birth and death to the planet of the demigods, where there's a much higher level of sense gratification. But it's still sense gratification. In many religions we see that persons are very much after going to heaven. They want to go to heaven. And they say that if you surrender to God, then you can go to heaven. And if you don't, if you're sinful, then you go to hell. And they say heaven is forever, and they say hell is forever. Right? But we understand from the Vedic literatures that heaven is temporary, and hell is also temporary. Right? It's for a short or long period of time, depending upon the karma or the activities of the living entity. And then the goal is not heaven. Although for even some of the Vedic followers, the Veda Ratas they're called, they're attached to the sacrificial performances of the Vedas to attain the heavenly planets. That's their goal. But if you really know the conclusion of the Vedas, as Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, Vaidaischya sarvair aham vedo vededa vid veda krid. What? Vedanta krid? Veda chaham. That I am the source of the Vedas, compiler of the Vedas, and by all of the Vedas, I am to be known. So this is the goal. Same thing we see in Sankhya Yoga. The analytical study is to know Krishna. Right? And therefore, since the process of devotional service is also to know Krishna, to become free from material attachments. They're one and the same. The conclusion is the same. Of course, we don't want to confuse Sankhya Yoga with the philosophy of the atheists. There's also an atheistic conclusion, and they call it Sankhya Yoga. It's not really Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga was enunciated by the incarnation of the Lord, known as Kapila Deva. He explained this Sankhya Yoga to his mother Devahuti. So this is the real Sankhya Yoga. This is the Sankhya Yoga with the proper conclusion. And even there's a chapter in Bhagavatam where Kapila Deva talks about devotional service. In the same part of the Bhagavatam where he's describing to his mother Devahuti about Sankhya Yoga, the analytical study of this material. What is this material body? He analyzes all the different elements that make up the material body and the material world. But he also talks about devotional service. So, devotional service directly approaches the Lord, right? Through service, through hearing about the Lord, remembering the Lord, chanting about the Lord, and in this way we develop an attachment for the Lord. Everyone has some propensity that they are good at, and in the beginning one can apply those talents or characteristics or propensities that one has in the devotional service. And by doing that, because it's something that is our nature, and we're doing it for Krishna, we derive happiness from that. Right? From the service itself, we derive happiness. But as the devotee progresses in devotional service, and the attachment to sense gratification minimizes, the relationship with Krishna becomes established. And when the relationship with Krishna is established, then the devotee derives happiness from the relationship. Ultimately, it's a matter of relationship. Everything in the material world is about relationship. Two businessmen, they sit down and have lunch together in a restaurant, and they're sharing food, right? One pays the bill, and in this way they're developing a relationship. And based on that relationship, business happens. Right? Two friends come together and they have a startup business, right? Because they have this relationship. Later on, when the business becomes big, they fight, and one has to leave, and it happens all the time. Why? Because the relationship becomes spoiled. So it's the same in spiritual life. It's about relationship. All the processes are there for relationship. And that relationship is with Krishna. Developing relationship with Krishna. So what the spiritual master gives the devotees that are engaged in sadhana bhakti is sambandha jnana. Right? He gives the knowledge by where the relationship becomes established with Krishna. When the relationship with Krishna is established, then the devotee can actually relish devotional service in its true form. Its true form. Devotional service in the beginning is also relishable because we're dovetailing our propensities in Krishna service. But later on, it's just the relationship and nothing more. Like the sons of Krishna. Krishna had so many sons. How many wives did Krishna have? 16,108 wives. And each wife had how many sons? It's a lot of sons. But all the sons of Krishna were so much attached to Krishna that even if they like to do something, if Krishna didn't like it, they would never do it. And even if they didn't like to do something, if Krishna wanted them to do it, they would do it happily. And that is all based on relationship. That is the goal. That's what we're striving to attain. And whether it's through Sankhya Yoga, analyzing carefully the material world to come to its source, right? That the ultimate goal is to understand the source and develop the relationship. Or whether it's following the practice of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, and performing the process of hearing and chanting and rendering service, the goal is the same. To come to a loving relationship with Krishna. And that's when the living entity will actually become happy. Otherwise, there's no happiness. Only some suffering in the material world. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions? That's the sum and substance of this verse. Are there any questions? Yes. Yeah, it's not the same. I said that. They're not the same in that sense. They're two different processes, but their goal is the same. The goal of Sankhya, and that's what Krishna's point to Arjuna was, right? The goal of Sankhya is to, it's actually renunciation. You see the material world and you see how it works. You analyze it, and you come to the conclusion, I'm not going to be happy here. I'm not getting happiness from all the things that I analyze in the material world, right? So that's there. But the end result of it should be that Vishnu is the source of everything. Vasudeva sarvamiti, samahatma sadurlava, bahunam jamanam. Yeah, it may take many births. It may take some more time. And the process of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada, Sevanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedam, that's going to be quicker. So, goal is the same, process of different, and certainly the process of Bhakti Yoga is going to be like taking the lift to the 100th floor, and the other processes of yoga are like taking the stairs to the 100th floor. You'll both get there, but if you go by lift, you'll get there quicker, isn't it? So it's like that also. But the goal is the same. The end result is the same. That's why Krishna is saying, you'll enjoy the fruit, the phalam, the fruit, by performing either one. Yeah. Well, what does it mean, atheistic? It means they're analyzing the material world and coming to a conclusion that there is no God. God does not exist. There's nirvishesh, or sunyavadi. Right? The Buddhists have a similar thing. They feel that in this material world, you're suffering birth, death, old age, and disease. And in the ultimate realization, there's sunyavadi, zero, nothing. Right? That's the Buddhist conclusion. And there's other offshoots of Hinduism that have a similar conclusion. So analyzing the material world and coming up with the conclusion that nothing, that's the atheistic Sankhya philosophy. But we follow the conclusion of Kapila Dev. And Kapila's conclusion, after delineating the different elements of the material world and analyzing them carefully, talks about the conclusion of being devotional service, understanding the source and rendering service to the source, understanding the root of the tree and then watering the root, putting water on the root of the tree.
You were talking about how we can use our talents and propensities to serve Krishna, and out of that, using our propensity or talent, we get some happiness also. Material, but also if we use our nature, then we get some satisfaction or happiness. So the satisfaction, happiness that we will get, will there be duality that associated with that? As
What duality?
like outside, whenever we are happy, then sadness will come along.
Well, that outside means happiness derived from sense gratification. That will have a beginning and an end. Sense gratification, the happiness from sense gratification, has a beginning and it has an end. Right? And Prabhupada gives the example. You take one rasgulla, very nice, 2, 3, 4, but then end. You can't take more. But you can come every day and see Radha Rasbihari, nicely dressed, and never become satiated. Right? You'll always, find some new thing with Krishna, because he's ever fresh. Right? So there's a world of difference. Iron and gold, they're both metals. You're using your senses to see something, but in material sense gratification, you're trying to see some, beautiful girl or some beautiful scenery somewhere. Right? And you're also using your eyes to see the beauty of Krishna nicely dressed, but there's a world of difference, right? In the end result. By that scene of Krishna, you're establishing your relationship with Krishna. And by seeing something in this material world, which the mind says, oh, this is very nice. It's just the dictation of the mind. How long is the beautiful girl going to be beautiful anyway? When you pick a rose, the rose looks very beautiful. But after some time, it becomes shriveled. Is it not? So your appreciation of that will also become dwindled. And it's the mind that's telling us, oh, this is very nice, this is very attractive. Right? And even in devotional service, the mind will be coming before the deity and dancing in front of Krishna, oh, this is very nice. But because the mind is very fickle, sometimes it's like a wild animal. You can't trust it. If you have a lion living in your house, you can't trust that. He's a wild animal, right? Maybe he'll cooperate with you and maybe he won't. So the mind is like that. You don't trust the mind. Therefore, the regulated principles of devotional service are there so that the mind can be under control. Therefore, the end result of seeing the beautiful form of Krishna is that your relationship with Krishna will be established. Krishna, in the form of the deity, he's ready to talk with you. He's ready to interact with you. But we have to develop our relationship. There's the story of the Sakshi Gopal Didi, the young Brahmin, was in Vrindavan, and he met an old Brahmin who he helped in his prikrama. And the old Brahmin was so happy that the young Brahmin had helped him. He said, I want you to marry my daughter. And he said, look, I'm from a poor family, you're a wealthy person. I wouldn't. He said, no, I'm saying you helped me so much, I want you to marry my daughter. So anyway, the promise was given in front of the Gopal Didi. And the older Brahmin said, see, I'm saying in front of the Didi. So they went their ways after the prikrama. Like the devotees, they go in prikrama, and then after prikrama, they go here and there. So when he got back to his home, the older Brahmin, who lived in Orissa, then he told them, informed them, this boy helped me and he's very good and I want him to marry. So his eldest son objected. He said, Hare, he has no money, no job. How can he marry my sister? I'll never agree. He said, but I promised. He said, just tell him you forgot your promise. So after some time, the young Brahmin, he came to the village of the older Brahmin, and just so that the older Brahmin could keep his word and that he gave in front of Sakshi Gopal. Immediately when he came into the house, the son came out and said, hey, you get out of here. Who are you? How my father will give you in marriage to my sister. He said, well, he promised in front of Gopal Didi. Well, if Gopal promised, if you promised in front of God, let him come here and then be the witness. So the young Brahmin had so much faith in the Gopal Didi that he said, okay, and he went back to Vrindavan. So he came before the Gopal Didi in Vrindavan and reminded them but now they're not listening, and certainly that old Brahmin will have to suffer for not keeping his word. But they say he'll be able to keep his word if you come with me and bear witness. So the Didi replied, he said, I'm a Didi, how can I walk all the way to Orissa from Vrindavan? And then the young Brahmin said, but my dear Lord, you're talking to me, so certainly you can walk. So then the Didi said, okay, I'll come with you, provided when you walk, you don't look back. And you'll know that I'm behind you because my Nupur, the Bengals, you'll hear them. So the Brahmin started out, and he was hearing behind him, cling, 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 and he knew Gopal was there. So he went to the village, and just before he got to the village, he didn't hear the Bengal. So he turned around, and there was Gopal Didi standing there. But now he wasn't moving. Big Didi, big stone Didi. How many have seen Sakshi Gopal in Orissa? Oh, so many. Nice. So then he went to the village, and he summoned old Brahmin. See, the Gopal Didi has come to bear witness. And then everyone was amazed that how could the Gopal Didi come all the way from Vrindavan? Okay? So Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna, he's ready to have his relationship with us. But we have to purify our hearts, make a determination to give up sense gratification so that we can establish our relationship to Krishna. Any other questions? Are there any questions on YouTube? Yeah? You can give a question if you want on YouTube. Just in the chat, you can write a question if you like. Anybody watching this program? You can write on the chat, and our technician here will get the question and tell us, if you want. We should give an opportunity to our social media viewers to ask a question. In the Hindi group, any questions? Okay. All right. You have a question.
Can you clarify that word of
Sankhya.
What is the meaning of
Sankhya. Prabhupada translated as the analytical study of the material world. You know, before renunciation, so that Sankhya concept of analyzing the material world and renunciation of work go hand in hand. Right? As you understand what this material world is, the conclusion will be to become detached from it. It's the process of detachment, analyzing the material world. So that's what Sankhya means. It means to come to the point of renunciation and to analyze what is the source of the material world. You know, Krishna says, I'm the source of both the material and the spiritual world. So to come to that conclusion, there's Sankhya Yoga, which is the analytical study of all the material elements. To come to the conclusion, what is the source? What is the foundation? Where does it all come from? And that's Vishnu. Prabhupada says the Paramatma, Super Soul. Just like you have a soul, your soul, you are soul. It's in the body. Your body has life, has consciousness because of the presence of the soul. Is it not? Without the presence of the soul, the body has no life. In the same way, this universe, this material manifestation, it has its life because of the super consciousness of the Paramatma, the super soul. So you want to analyze this world and all its different elements to come to the conclusion of the source of it, which is the Supreme Lord. Yes.
Thank you very much for the about the Sankhya Yoga and all these books and everything. So my question is not from this, but I just want to ask that in Gita there are 18 chapters, but you choose especially this chapter to give lectures on this chapter. So is there anything behind what you have chosen this chapter?
Well, we were having Wednesday night Bhagavad Gita classes some time ago in Prabhupada's quarters, and we had gotten to this point, 5th chapter. So that's where I took up where I left off from the Wednesday night Bhagavad Gita classes in Srila Prabhupada's quarters. There's no esoteric underlying, it's just where I left off, that's all. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi.